Welcome to AZ TechCast, sponsored by Arizona Technology Council with your hosts, Steve Zelstra and Karen Nowicki. AZ TechCast is dedicated to covering innovation and technology in Arizona and beyond. Broadcasted monthly, AZ TechCast invites leading experts to have real conversations about what is happening in the tech sector across the state of Arizona. From regional news to innovative startups, companies, and emerging technologies, AZ TechCast covers the critical issues and economic trends propelling the state's growing ecosystem.
Thank you, JDH Insights, for being our 2021 Tech Advocate sponsor. A leader in coaching and executive development, JDH Insights is committed to helping organizations cultivate and leverage their most important and complex asset, their humans. Visit jdhinsights.com to enhance leadership and improve team dynamics to take your business to the next level.
Welcome. I'm Karen Nowicki and so pleased to be with you here today. During today's TechCast, we have distinguished experts going to speak with us and on behalf of USMCA, how this modernized trade agreement is strengthening the Arizona-Mexico-Canada Bond, and how it promotes robust economic growth in North America. And we have a lot of ground to cover. And before we do that, I'd like to give a shout out as well to Arizona Commerce Authority, AZ TechCast 2021 innovation sponsor. The Arizona Commerce Authority is the state's leading economic development organization with a streamlined mission to grow and strengthen Arizona's economy. The Commerce Authority uses a three-pronged approach to advance the overall economy: recruit, grow, and create. So with that, I'd like to welcome today's distinguished panelists. We have with us today Patrick Welch, an attorney with the law firm Jennings, Strouss, and Salmon. Welcome, Patrick.
Good afternoon. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And Glenn Williamson, founder and CEO of the Canada-Arizona Business Council. Welcome, sir.
Thank you very much for having me.
And for those of you who are just listening to the audio version of this, either live with us or podcast eventually, Glenn's got this amazing background. And every time each one of us have come onto the Zoom call today, we're like, wow, Glenn, are you really sitting in front of that ice rink?
Close, but no, not yet. But still watching the game.
Love it. And for those of us here in Arizona, you know, it's starting to heat up. It's almost 100 degrees, or actually I think it might be 100 degrees a day. So I'm envious. I'll pretend like you're sitting there. And then Dan Yuso, Senior Counsel at Thompson, Hine, LLP. Welcome, Dan.
Great to be with you. Thanks.
Did I do okay on that last name?
You nailed it.
Woohoo! It only took a couple times practicing out loud and then in my mind. And of course, with us today is my partner as we present this show each month, Steve Zelstra. Welcome, sir.
Thank you, Karen. It's great to be here.
Well, welcome back. We missed you last month.
Yeah, I know. I was out of town.
Yep. Well, we're glad you're here. So we, as I mentioned, have a lot of ground to cover. And Steve and I always find that the hour goes so quickly. I'd love, before we get into the meat of the conversation, for each of you to take a moment to introduce yourselves, the role that you play, and really why you believe that Steve and Jill and the Arizona Tech Council invited you into this conversation today. So, Patrick, if you don't mind kicking it off for us, greatly appreciate it.
Sure. My name is Patrick Welch. I'm a partner at the law firm of Jennings, Strouss, and Salmon. We're big supporters of the Tech Council and have been for a number of years, and really proud of that relationship. I have a cross-border practice between Arizona and Mexico. I represent companies, both U.S. companies going into Mexico and Mexican companies coming into the United States, whether that's transaction or litigation related. I'm married to my beautiful wife, Maribel, who's a Sonoran. And as I mentioned during our pregame here, I'm actually sitting on the beach here right in Kino, which is just off the coast of the capital city of Sonora called Hermosillo. So I'm trying to emphasize NAFTA, USMCA, spend some money here, that type of thing.
And you're doing it well. Now that I know that you're on the coast, I'm going to exchange Glenn's ice rink for where you are. I just would like to see the background. I want palm trees. I want water. Anyway, well, thank you. So glad to have you here. And Glenn, if you'd introduce...
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, our pleasure. Glenn, could you introduce yourself as well?
Certainly, Karen. I'm Glenn Williamson. I'm the CEO of the Canada-Arizona Business Council. We're about a 14, 15-year-old business council in Arizona. And I'm also in the senior management as chairman of a company called EPCOR in the state of Arizona. And we're out of Edmonton. So we actually live, breathe, and do the work between the two countries.
So are you based here in Arizona then?
I am based here in Arizona.
Well, so in my mind, I went, you're in Canada, but
Well, don't let the background fool you. I'm a big fan of hockey, and the playoffs are on right now. And I'm from Montreal, so I have to watch the Montreal-Toronto. Now that we're in an overtime Game 7, I just have to be all over this.
and if I were really paying attention, which I know these three gentlemen and probably Jill in the background are thinking, Karen, it says right there, Gila River Arena. Hello, Gila River. Steve's not. So right, I clearly not a hockey fan. So yes, I'm glad I'm now grounded and landed. Dan, your turn. Tell us who you are, please.
Sure. I'm Dan Yuso. I'm an international trade and transportation lawyer. So my world is moving stuff. And I have a past life working in the U.S. government on border issues, as well as the Canadian government. So I've worked on both sides. And for about came back to the dark side of private law practice about a decade ago, if not more. And spent my life working very similar to what Patrick said, with companies between Canada, United States, U.S., Mexico, Canada, Mexico, and then stitching those supply chains around the world. And so during USMCA, I was at all the negotiating rounds, representing clients in those discussions, and have been getting companies ready to use it and continuing to use it right now. So that's and basically I just do whatever Glenn tells me to do. That's why I'm here today. So that's usually how it works. I've known Glenn for a long time, and that really is the model of how to run a Canada-U.S. Business Association, is what they do at the Canada-Arizona Business Council.
Very good. And I'm saving Steve for last. I would love for you to introduce yourself for our listeners who are not familiar with the Arizona Tech Council. And then again, why this topic today? If you can just tee that up for us, and then we'll just jump right in.
Certainly. Steve Zelstra. I'm president and CEO of both the Arizona Technology Council and our foundation, the SciTech Institute. Always great to see everyone. This is an especially important topic to me and to our organization. A lot of our members export to both Canada and Mexico. Lots of cross-border partnerships and relationships. Mexico's our number one trading partner, and Canada is number two. So, there couldn't be two more important countries, and they're right on both of our northern and southern borders. And I've had the opportunity to, I grew up near Canada in Michigan. Used to travel to Canada a lot. And since I've come to Arizona, I've spent an awful lot of time in Mexico, both for business and pleasure, sometimes with the Arizona-Mexico Commission, and sometimes with the mayor of Phoenix, sometimes with the governor. And it's just both of them are critical relationships for the success of Arizona's economy.
Absolutely. And before we jump in, I am just now picturing LinkedIn posts and celebrations. Steve, congratulations on the most recent, a couple of awards, right? Can you speak to that? So I won't do it justice if I try to eke out what the terms were and the awards specifically, but I would love to acknowledge you and your group for that.
Sure, thank you. Well, the Phoenix Chamber awarded us an Exceptional Innovator Award, which we were very proud of. And then there are 4 categories in 2 different sizes of firms. And we were in the 250 or less, of course. We have 10 of us. We won the Business of the Year. So we were pretty proud of that. That's a very important and prestigious award, and we couldn't be happier about it. Thank you.
Absolutely. All right. So for our listeners, again, who are just getting to know all of you or some of you for the first time, what exactly is the USMCA and how is it different from NAFTA? Anybody can jump in there and then just tag off each other.
This is Patrick. I'm happy to take a shot at it. It's interesting. Just the breadth of the document itself is pretty impressive. People may not have an understanding of just like what the physical size of the document is. I think that kind of gives you an idea of how important of a regional trade agreement it is. It's 1,800 pages. It's pretty long, 34 chapters. You compare that to NAFTA, which was only 12. There's 18 annexes. There's 12 side letters. I mean, just the physical size of the document is extremely large and comprehensive because it's such an important agreement. I looked at kind of some of the things before we started in terms of the document itself, and I thought the preamble was, pretty telling in terms of a description of what it it's all about. And it says here, the preamble is to preserve and expand regional trade and production by further incentivizing production and sourcing of goods and materials in the region. And what I was struck by this was it uses the word region twice in the preamble, which tells you, obviously you've got 3 countries that are involved in this agreement. But regional is all about localization in my mind. I try to compare the agreement to kind of other things in life by analogy. And you think about our foodie friends out there, people who are into food and whatnot. You think about the concept of farm to table. That's what localization, that's what a regional trade agreement is all about. It's about, sourcing your ingredients from local sources, whether that's meats or grains or whatever it may be for the people who have an interest in food. Well, when you're talking about supply chains, it's all about sourcing and bringing your supply chains into a region where your production is occurring, but which is also really close to your markets. The days of exporting and offshoring to China and India, there are still those markets and there's still those cost advantages in some instances. But a lot of companies are looking for stability, and that's what I think this agreement's all about. It's all about creating stability, and foreign direct investment likes stability, and that's why the legal institutions of this agreement I think are so important.
For someone who's just coming to this conversation for the first time, that is extremely helpful. What else would anybody like to add?
If you like food, it's important, right?
Yeah, that made sense to me. Dan?
Anyone want to add to that?
Yeah, I would just say that this is Dan. I think we have to take a moment to talk about how we got here to this point. I neglected to mention in the opening, I'm not on the beaches or in Arizona. I'm sitting in Columbus, Ohio, right? And I make my home here in the industrial Midwest, and in particular, I'm from Youngstown, Ohio, which is the kind of the city that Bruce Springsteen sings songs about, right? And the fact is that NAFTA became a punching bag for everything that was wrong, not only in the relationship between the 3 countries, but and you could throw everything unrelated to trade to that, immigration issues, other types of things, but change in manufacturing, all of those things that had been building for 30 years, if not longer. And so really one of the major mistakes we made in the original NAFTA was that it was so hard to get it through Congress the last time in the 90s. President Bush negotiated it and President Clinton got it through Congress, right? It's got to fast forward to when we did USMCA. That's exactly what happened with Mexico. When we did USMCA, the prior regime, EPN, negotiated it, and AMLO is the one that actually got it through the ratification process. But it sat there for 30 years, and we didn't really update it, and nobody ever wanted to touch it. Every time we needed to do something with NAFTA to bring it up to speed, to how fast things changed in the late 1990s and throughout the early part of this century. I mean, here we are at the Arizona Technology Council, right, where we're living that every day. And NAFTA was still an agreement from the late 80s to some extent by the time it was negotiated, but nobody would touch it politically. And it just became this piñata. And of course, by the time President Trump came along, it was not just Republican, it wasn't just Democrats and labor that were beating up on it. It was now the movement that we've seen. And so I've said many times to Glenn's group, and some of you on the line have likely heard me say this, we didn't rip up NAFTA in USMCA, but it's not about 60% of it's the same of USMCA. And Patrick was talking about the size, about 60% is roughly the same with a fresh coat of paint. But 40% of $1 trillion economy is still a lot of business. So it's not a rebrand either. We renovated. And President Trump used that word very early on. We thought he was going to rip up NAFTA like in February 2017. And instead of saying, I'm doing that, he came out of his first meeting on USMCA and said, I'm going to renovate it. And I thought there's a perfect phrase for a real estate mogul turned president, maybe alleged real estate mogul, but that's a different issue. But the issue there, though, is that we renovated. We put a fresh coat of paint. Number 2, we added new fixtures and appliances. So we got it up to speed for the 21st century. So we added a digital chapter directly relevant to the folks on the line right now. We put in things about the border, all the work that we did after 9/11 on border issues between the U.S. and Mexico, U.S. and Canada. We took all that homework and put it into this new agreement. And we started looking at the future, electric vehicles and things of that nature, and got that into this agreement. But then we knocked down some walls too. And anybody that's ever done a renovation, as you knock down walls, it's going to take longer, it's going to be disruptive, and it's going to cost much more than you ever thought. And that's what we're still working through a little bit later. Labor issues with Mexico, restructuring the automotive industry. Because quite frankly, I think the view of many people was that, particularly in Canada, the United States, that it just became a southward movement. And candidly, that didn't reflect what was going on in the auto industry. It was actually, not only did it become a trilateral, movement toward Mexico, but it became China and others using Mexico to bring goods into the North American space. So that was an unintended consequence. So how do you deal with those issues? And so this agreement tries to take care of a number of problems. So there's those things, as we talk today, there's issues that we were addressing problems, but at the same time, the trade-off was, what did we get as the business community and elsewhere out of this? Or what did the technology community get, ICT in particular? So there's those constant trade-offs, and that's what we're working through right now as we begin to implement.
Karen, I'd like to add to what Dan said, particularly about the technology industry. There were really two important things that ultimately got negotiated into the agreement, and that is, first of all, think about the fact that the internet didn't really come along until the early 90s, right? So it was not even contemplated in the original the NAFTA agreement. So it had to be updated, as Dan indicated. There's a whole digital chapter in there. And in addition to that, this concept of transferring not goods across the border, but data. How do we do with these transfers of data? And that's one of the things that USMCA also dealt with. So that renovation that Dan referred to really brought it up to speed into the 21st century in many ways. And that was really important to the technology industry. I'd like to ask Glenn a question, and then anyone else, please chime in as well. I've served on the Arizona District Export Council for about a dozen years, and every meeting we have now, all the discussion is about the border issues. The pandemic has created some significant issues at the border. Immigration issues have created issues at the border. It's been difficult to get goods across the border. Can you speak to that a little bit, particularly, Glenn, from the Canadian side? I know you've been at the forefront of that, and how it's impacted Arizona.
You bet, Steve. So first and foremost, the security issue is the security issue, and that is a standalone subject. Unfortunately, it has been blended into the commerce discussion. The delineation is really sloppy. Now, business people on both sides know what they want to do, and they look at agreements like NAFTA, and they go, gosh darn, I'm really glad I got the brand new plane. Now, how do I put more people in the seats? They want to get back to the business of moving stuff back and forth. So the agreement's now been done. The lawyers did their job. Everything is good to go. So now the business people come across the border and they go, well, the security thing's getting in the way. It is 80% noise. And the reality is that a lot of these people at the border have facilitated something during a pandemic that most of us take for granted. The fact that we have commerce running across both southern and northern borders at the pace that it's running across is absolutely phenomenal. Countries around the world are envious. This is also, Steve, I believe, a moment in time where supply chains got halted for a period and they're going to get rerouted again. And this is an opportunity for North America to use this roadmap that lawyers like Dan and Patrick have been involved in to build up something competitive to Asia and Europe. And to do that, we have to sort out North America. Canada and Mexico need to do more together. Canada and the US already do a ton together. The US and Mexico do a ton together. We need to start acting in North America as a competitive trading bloc and sort out some of this stuff and separate the noise and the chaff away from the wheat and the reality at these borders. Companies and groups like Chicanos por la Causa are doing a spectacular job with what David Adame is doing over in Texas. And here, there are organizations that are just knocking it out of the park. Your members within the Tech Council, they have to put up with a lot of that stuff. But the reality is, if ABC entity from Phoenix, Arizona wants to go down and set up in Hermosillo with Patrick, they're going to do it. They're just going to double check some of the safety and security stuff, but they're going to do it. These roadmaps are really, really important. But at the end of the day, for this North American economy to be significant, we have to get back to the people, the relationships, the meetings, and step aside and look at this in a really personal way. And the Tech Council, Steve, there's nobody better than your organization for the amount of meetings, the amount of put-togethers, the amount of stuff that you do that keeps that fostered. And I congratulate you on that more. Arizona is smack dab in the middle of NAFTA because of its unusually productive relationship with Mexico, with organizations like the Mexican Arizona Council and that whole commission. And we've got the CABC down here. So we in Arizona have found ourselves, people like Juan Ciscomani and myself and others are going, we really are this unique position to draw in two countries from either end and get them working together more and more, using Arizona as a petri dish, using NAFTA as a recipe, and the ability to make this incredible dinner is sitting right here on our plate in Arizona.
Anyone have anything to add?
This is Patrick. To Glenn's point, again, the whole idea of keeping it local, I think resonates throughout this agreement and through Glenn's comments, whether it's local through organizations like Chicanos por la Causa or the Arizona Tech Council. I think those organizations play a really important role there. I think they're key, players in the development of where this agreement actually goes as it's being implemented. Glenn spoke about briefly about the idea of kind of due diligence. If someone's going to want to go down and make an investment in Sonora, for example. And Steve, I remember from one of the first Arizona Tech Council new member receptions I attended, I remember meeting a medical device company that had a set up down at the Tech Park in Hermosillo. There are companies, within the Tech Council who are members or who may be thinking about joining that have opportunities south of the border or north of the border in Canada that they can take advantage of. And I think that the structures that organizations like the Tech Council have in place to support those efforts or those initiatives is really important. Keeping it local, trying to figure out how someone can, take advantage of the idea that when you're an Arizona-based company and you have operations or production or coding or whatever you may have going on down in Sonora, you've got people who have familiarity with languages. You have people who have familiarity with culture, whether that's food culture or that's television culture, whatever it may be, music culture. But when you've got partners on both sides of the border that understand one another, are familiar with one's cultures, it allows for business to be done much more efficiently and much better.
Patrick, I want to add to that if I can, just from the Canadian diaspora in Arizona, the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of Canadian companies that are here. Do you know that they all probably over 90% of them started as tourists? Yeah. CEOs and senior management, they would come down, they would meet someone like Steve, and Steve would tell them about what's going on, and the council would then fill them in. And then all of a sudden that person would go, wow, I'm on the board of XYZ company up in Montreal or in Toronto. I think I'm going to look at this. And then they'll phone up a lawyer like Dan and say, hey, Dan, is this okay? Can I go in there? But they've already mentally made the decision after having a drink with Steve, learning about the organization like the Tech Council. Now it's up to the facilitators, i.e. the operations people in their companies, and the lawyers to make sure that this NAFTA agreement complies what they want. But usually the CEO and board members have made that emotional decision. And you cannot You cannot print an emotional decision. It is something. It is something that it's an emotion, and once it happens, professionals then make the execution occur. And thank God for the Tech Council, which I've watched grow up from the very beginning. You have taken and put this market, Steve, and your organization on the map, because when those of us are traveling around the globe and we're competing with discussions with someone in Germany and Italy and Switzerland and Hong Kong, we get to talk about you, we get to point to your website, and that person sitting in Stad's going, wow, I never even heard of that. You guys are operating that, and it's done. And it is so, so important. And then the agreement, the actual NAFTA agreement, is truly the icing on the cake, because what the lawyers have done here is made this facilitation so much easier to do deals between three countries in this continent.
And if you think about that, this is Dan Yuso, just to build off that, Patrick and Glenn both made this point, but to amplify it a bit, I think if there's any silver lining of the tragedies, the countless tragedies of the last year and change, are that this was the great timeout of the last year and a half. I mean, for all of us that are, I'm used to being on planes 4 or 5 days a week, right? And my wife of 20 years, this is the most we've ever spent in the same household. I mean, it's like, wow, I forgot we do. This is how normal people live, I guess. I don't know, because we rarely see each other. She travels just as much as I do. So but it's also been, wonderful in so many ways. And I think people are discovering that. I think that's happening both in North America and in global supply chains, is that for so long we kind of certainly US, Canada took each other for granted, I think, and increasingly North America did. And then when our borders have closed, and Glenn made a great point, we learned in September 11, 2001, I'm a border guy. I worked for the respective agencies, was we had to spend 15 years figuring out how to never let that happen again. And so as soon as the pandemic hit, all that homework came into place. So we've been able to move commercial traffic. We didn't shoot ourselves in the foot, even making the economic challenges worse by closing our borders to the economy. But what we frankly haven't got right is the travel, tourism, and business part people. And I think as we'll see over the next month, hopefully in Canada, US, maybe a bit longer, US, Mexico, as vaccination rates get to where they need to be, I just hope we're creative on how we do this, that we don't say what applies for the rest of the world should apply for North America. Because there's an advantage here that, I'm against the vaccine passport within North America, to be honest with you. I don't think it makes sense to me. It may make sense to screen for the rest of the world coming into North America, but we could actually give ourselves a competitive advantage by not doing that in this region. And similarly, for no matter how we got to doing the USMCA, it's kind of been good timing. We finished our agreement right as the pandemic hit. So as we're looking for economic recovery, we have an agreement in place right now. We did the hard part, and now we have to go forward and implement it, while our friends in Europe are still trying to figure out what's going on over there with Brexit and everything else. And frankly, I used to work for the European Union. They've been trying to figure that out for a long time, but they're doing that. And Asia is going through some fundamental changes and what we're seeing. And then companies are sitting here saying, well, wait a minute. Europe may not be what we used to think it was. Asia, we've just seen the risks in real time over the last year of what happens when your supply chain gets extended. And now you throw in an entire movement on ESG, what used to be corporate social responsibilities, now environmental social governance and labor issues around the world. And people are saying, you know what, North America ain't so bad right now. And we've done the hard part. So I really think that's where there's a great opportunity. There's a great opportunity for tech companies, in my opinion, is that companies are going to say that, you naturally look to North America for that anyway, but the supply base is going to build around that too. That's what we did in USMCA. That's the untold story, is we've made it really hard to bring new technology from around the world into North America. That you're not going to be able to source a lithium-ion cell from overseas within the next 2 years because of USMCA, right? It'll just be too expensive. That's why you see LG and SK and everybody setting up shop here, not just to do the assembly, but to actually put the cells here and manufacture those. And we're going to see that across the board in AI and elsewhere. It won't just be the R&D. The old model was do the R&D in North America and go let the production happen somewhere else, right? And the value-added jobs and all of that, that's coming back home. And whether you call that nearshoring, whether you call it reshoring, or now ally shoring is the new phrase, but I think we're going to see a lot of that. And so what I've been telling all of our tech clients, and I'm sure Patrick does the same thing, is understand this agreement. Make sure you understand it. And so that when a supplier comes to you, you're like, we're ready to go. We're already certified. We've gone through the process, blah, blah, blah. We know we have supply chain transparency. What do you need? What do you need? We're here to supply you. And now's the time to do that. Like this, the early adopters are going to get well ahead in the recovery because we've already done the hard part. And that's what I think is the exciting piece for all the horrors of the last year. We're ready to go in a much different way than the rest of the world is.
One of you alluded to this, but another opportunity that it presents, I think Lucid Motors is a perfect example of it. They've set up a manufacturing operation in Casa Grande, halfway between Phoenix and Tucson. And the CEO has said innumerable times, besides the great business climate that we have here in Arizona, it was being close to the automotive industry supply chain that's available in Mexico. So there's a perfect example of how opportunity can be created by attracting another industry here because of our proximity to either Canada or Mexico.
I agree with you, Steve. We're seeing supply chain companies from Canada set up shop because of those two facilities now in Casa Grande. And I'm also a big believer that when I look at what's going on in Toronto and Montreal and the growth of technology companies that they're getting, Europeans and Asians right now, the pandemic has been very, very painful. But the strategic thinkers in both Europe and Asia right now are going, what if North America gets their act together? Mm-hmm. What will happen? And that is, that is strategically sitting on a lot of desks. When you start seeing companies from Taiwan setting up billion-dollar facilities in Arizona and starting to migrate, to your point, Steve, into North America, and to Dan's point on supply chain, you are absolutely spot on. Okay, jeepers, I'm really sorry that big old ship got stuck in the canal. Boy, did that expose a problem. And, those people in those supply chains are going, now, was it really worth the extra 40 cents per unit savings to actually be that risk, have that kind of underwriting risk that's going to happen? So I think you're going to see a lot of boardroom decisions right now that are going to be looking at North America, and they're going to be looking at centers of excellence. And right now, I hate to say it, but we're watching a decline in California and New York and Illinois, and we're watching a massive increase in Texas, Arizona, Nevada, through the roof in technology companies moving into these regions because COVID-19 just proved the point. You don't need to be in an office, especially in certain parts of technology. And that's all of a sudden lifestyle becomes a big issue.
Steve, how does that change or add on to what you are already doing? Everything that Glenn just spoke to, what has that called you and your organization, the companies that you work with, to do? I mean, to continue to make those alliances and make yourself available. How does that look for you?
Well, certainly from my point, I've got about 500 Canadian companies here and about 130 or 140 Arizona companies that operate in Canada. Technology we're using today was invented years and years ago, but we never just used it. What we're now finding is geography is no longer an issue. All those planes that Dan was flying around on, now we might get Zoom fatigue, but we are watching degrees of communication occur now that we could only dream about years ago. And when you're sitting in Hermosillo, where Patrick is, and he's got this good a connection, and it's perfect, you could be sitting next door in Scottsdale and having these kinds of discussions. This changes the dialogue in boardrooms. This is certainly in my boardrooms that I'm in. All of a sudden, you don't need these massive meetings anymore. All of a sudden, you can, if you have a relationship with people from years gone by physically and you know each other, that is going to withstand Zoom in a heartbeat. What'll be fascinating to watch is the next generation that doesn't have the relationship physically where they hung out together and did stuff, but they have a relationship online. And this is going to be really interesting to watch what the psychology of that's going to start to uncover. But my firm belief is this is a force multiplier that just hit us. And the question is, how much time do you spend focusing on what just happened versus what is going to happen and the redefinition of this landscape? And this is where companies and boards of directors and decision makers have got to cherry pick. And it's not just youth versus age. It's mental forward thinking, which is age restrictive. So whatever you can think of, if I've got a 70-year-old guy on my board and I've got a 24-year-old, the 70-year-old might come up with a more insanely cool idea than the younger person. So this is this great leveling that just occurred across the board, and it's going to be fascinating to watch.
Glenn, I can't underscore enough your point about this whole idea of how the next generation, who may not have those personal relationship already, I think it just underscores the importance of engagement and also this whole concept, intercultural communication. I think those two things are going to be pivotal moving forward. If we're looking to take the next jump with the USMCA, I've presented on a couple of different matters on intercultural communication, and knowing the differences between how a Mexican company and Mexican culture may perceive a dining engagement, for example, as compared to a Canadian or as compared to an American, is really important. Someone mentioned to me the other day, a Mexican comes to eat in the United States, and I think it may have came in the context of discussing Tucson as kind of a gastronomy capital of the world now that they've made some list. And with all the food that they've got going on down in Tucson, one of the things that came up was, having Mexican diners and making sure your staff of your restaurant knows not to drop the bill without someone asking, for example. That's a huge thing. That's from a tourism perspective. But you talked about having a U.S. company go down to Mexico. Well, a lot of business in Mexico is done over carne asadas. I mean, people laugh at me when on some of these presentations I'm on, because I always talk about carne asada. I love it, and one of the reasons I do is because there are so many great connections made over carne asada. How do you use charcoal or gas? That's the big, or it's always charcoal, and you got to use mesquite. What meat are you going to use? My father-in-law is buying, diez millo, which is a really thin cut of chuck. Well, then the discussion becomes, well, where did you buy it from? Is it Rancho 17? Did you get it from Nunez? And this whole conversation just develops over a meal between business partners. The next thing is, do you put the salt on before or after you flip it? All these different things. Who do you get your tortillas from? And you may have to have 2 or 3 carne asadas with people at their office, with their coworkers, with their families, and then you get a deal. And I think those types of the importance of engagement and understanding those cultural distinctions about how business is done, the winners, I think, are going to be the ones who understand those things.
So I've got a question, if I can, for Dan. So Dan, what the heck is going on with softwood lumber between Canada and the United States and building supplies?
Well, yeah, I mean, look, we've been fighting over softwood lumber which is just timber, right? The things we did have to, well, some people say that dispute actually goes back to the Civil War. There's actually Ambassador David Wilkins, who used to be the U.S. ambassador to Canada, actually in the embassy in Ottawa, the U.S. embassy in Ottawa, there's a picture of Abraham Lincoln giving the Gettysburg Address, and they pinned down this person in the picture who they say was a Canadian diplomat or British diplomat at the time that was there to talk to President Lincoln about softwood lumber. Like, they've traced it back that old. And why? We're fighting over trees, right? The things that we do argue over, the few disputes that we have between Canada, US, Mexico, generally come about things that grow out of the ground, or things that we both have and we kind of compete. But 99% of the relationship is complementary, right? That we're making goods together, we're innovating together, et cetera. The only things that where we really have disputes are, like I said, lumber, because we have a lot of trees in the Pacific Northwest and a lot in the U.S. Southeast in those regions. But that's often viewed as a U.S. to Canada dispute, government to government. But it's actually the U.S. lumber industry that controls that dispute. When a trade case is filed, I'm a trade lawyer, that's the industry. And once they file, it's really the U.S. government really can't say that's over. It's just like me going to court here, right? So the U.S. lumber industry saying, hey, prices look pretty good right now. We're not settling that dispute, but we're seeing that with commodities across the board, right? All prices are going up, and some of this is going to be short term as we come out of the recovery or get into the recovery. Other parts of it are structural. I mean, if we're going to the reality is if we're going to rebalance supply chains and not have cheap goods that are made with unfair labor practices or subsidized, et cetera, well, prices go up. And prices go up because you could argue that's the real price for those goods, right? Because they're not subsidized, right? And that's the part that I'm not sure everybody really appreciated, is that when we got off our addiction to China-sourced goods, subsidized goods, is that prices are going to go up. That's just the reality. And so my dog agrees. But one thing, and Glenn's one of the leading minds on this. The other part that there's a lot going on in North America right now is there's a lot of money sitting on the sidelines, investment dollars. And it gets to that where Glenn was saying earlier, the rest of the world's kind of looking at us and saying, are they going to get their act together in North America? Or are they going to shoot them? Or are they going to get there's always that line between complacency and contentment, right? And then in North America, we kind of lean towards complacent, right? We don't quite get to contentment. We say, hey, things are going well. We don't need to be as competitive vis-a-vis the rest of the world as a region. And I think right now, a lot of money is sitting there and looking at risks around the world and saying, you know what? The COVID's over. We're going to start investing. And right now, North America looks like the best place. So let's find tech companies to start putting those dollars into. Let's find infrastructure investments that we can go in public-private partnerships and those types of innovative ideas. Let's look for the next big idea in infrastructure, or the next big idea elsewhere. And I think that's what we're going to see coming down the pike right now. And that's it goes back to Patrick's earlier comments, stability. And that's what we got right now. And I think that those financial investments we're going to see as well.
Steve, I would love to hear you tag onto that. In your role, are you providing opportunities for those investors and those introductions, of course? I mean, what does the change look like?
Well, as you know, we represent our members and their interests. So one of the things we attempt to do is knock down barriers and obstacles that they may face. We do that obviously in the public policy realm at both the state and federal level. We've been very active recently communicating with our two senators about the border issues because of the impact that it's having. And it's something that's sort of, as I mentioned earlier, the topic of every conversation we have now at the Arizona District Export Council. So I think we're going to work through it, and it's going to get better as time goes on, as we get the pandemic behind us, and everyone feels more secure as a result of that. The tech industry is absolutely booming right now. I mean, even through the entire pandemic period, it grew 6.2% here in Arizona. The workforce did. While a lot of people were sort of held in place for a while, the tech industry continued to grow, and the investments that are being made here are just unbelievable. Probably have heard that Intel's investing $20 billion. TSMC is going to put in $12 billion, and that's just their initial investment. That'll grow to $35 billion over time. And one of the good things that's come out of the pandemic, at least for Americans, is that these supply chains are going to start moving back to North America. I think we heard a couple of weeks ago the CEO of Intel indicate that I think he said there was about 17% of the semiconductors in the world that were currently manufactured in Arizona or in the U.S., and he thinks that should be 35%. And, TSMC is the largest semiconductor enterprise in the world. And where are they investing? Arizona. So, but these relationships between Mexico and Canada are so important. I can't say enough about the importance. I think it was Patrick that mentioned this, of the relationships, right? And you can't develop those relationships, I don't think, over Zoom. So I think we are going to have to get back on airplanes and travel to the countries that we want to do partnerships with, we want to supply to, we want to collaborate with. And people want to get out right now, right? I think this is like the first holiday in a long time. People are traveling. It's just going to be crazy. I think there's a lot of pent-up demand for people to get out. And I think all three of our countries will benefit from that. And as we pull out of this pandemic and start the recovery.
I told you this would go very fast, and it has. We're about to wind down, but each of you have talked about and mentioned the collaborations as well as the alliances that have been formed. Are there any other key political, business, academic, or social leaders that are on board that we want to celebrate and give a shout out to? And who else needs to come to the conversation and to the table to strengthen these bonds?
So if I can take the first crack at that, Steve?
Yeah.
I think at a national level, all three countries have done their job on USMCA. I think now at a provincial, a state, a county, and a city level, people need to learn how to spell international, and they need to learn how to do North American. And it's to Patrick's point that he made earlier, this is really regional. And North America is a region. And we need to get more data going down lower and lower and lower into the food chains, into the regions, so that if I turn around and say, gee, Dan, how many Canadian companies are in Pima County? Or how many German companies are in Pima County? Or I go to Ontario, how many Arizona companies are in Ontario? And unfortunately, we don't have up-to-date data throughout all three countries. And without that data, it's really hard to point people into the right decision-making modes, certainly at board levels. So I'm a big fan of regionalization, like Patrick said, getting that data and helping people, educate people to make decisions at the highest level with tools in their hands. And their lawyers have USMCA in their hands. Now give the executives the tools to make decisions that helps propagate North America versus Asia and Europe.
I would just add, on the academic side, I've always been impressed with the amount of cross-border collaboration that goes on between post-secondary institutions. All over Mexico, all over Arizona, all over Canada, you see collaboration going on. So I think that's definitely an area that we should celebrate. I would say that this governor has done a great deal to repair the relationship with Mexico after the previous governor, from Senate Bill 1070. We all remember that and the impact that it had on the relationship with Mexico. And, this governor has spent a lot of time in Mexico and had a very spectacular relationship with the governor of Sonora. And she's, I think her term ends this year. And of course, we only have Ducey for another year and a half or so. So, I think at least Arizona and Mexico and Arizona and Canada have very good relationships, as Glenn pointed out, at the government level. And we all need to do more to inform and educate, particularly in my case, companies about the opportunities that exist by partnering with other countries and particularly with businesses in other countries.
I would just say, this is Danny, I would just say there would not be a USMCA without the leadership in Arizona, full stop, because it was a little bumpy ride there for a while. And it was the Arizona, both Governor Ducey and the congressional delegation leaders in the business community, two of whom are on the line right here, and Patrick as well. And now the other real active state was Texas, and the Arizona folks have gone to Texas now. So it doesn't. It's interesting how that worked from the chamber, but and there was some leadership here in the U.S. Midwest. But one of the things I'll just say very quickly is we can't make the mistake we did last time with NAFTA, which we fought really hard in this agreement to make sure that this was an agreement that would get done and just sit. It's meant to be a living, breathing organism. There's roughly 30 governmental committees created for each of those chapters Patrick mentioned. There's sub-working groups. And fortunately, we saw that just last week. It was the first meeting of the free trade agreement. So the 3 trade ministers, all of whom are women for the first time, which means we'll actually get this right for once. And if my personal life teaches anything, it'll come together perfectly. But they're getting reports from all these committees now. And that's a way to keep that evergreen, but we can't rely on government. And Glenn touched on this. Government's the alpha and the omega. It sets the rules. We're going to have a trade deal, and then tell us what you need, and we'll go at the end. But in the middle's us, the business community. And we always do this with trade deals. We get them done, and then we don't train the companies how to use them, right? And that's where we really have to invest some time and energy. And that's why Arizona Tech Council, Canada Arizona Business Council, et cetera, are constantly doing these things so we can teach companies how to take advantage of these agreements, because otherwise it just sits there, right? And so we really have to work on the implementation side, get those committees, get companies engaged to say, what do you need? What do you need? Because now there's a mechanism to keep it evergreen. And if we do that, we're going to be ahead. But unfortunately, we tend to fall back. And that's why we just got to push. And if there's any message I could give is to get engaged on USMCA.
Patrick, anything? Yeah, want to add to that?
I'd echo Dan's point on engagement. And it's one about getting the companies to understand and implement, like Dan said, and like Glenn said. I think that's really important. I think the charge that we have for the various business organizations, the associations, whether it's the chamber, whether it's the tech council, whether it's humanitarian organizations, whether it's organizations focused on diversity and inclusion, whatever it may be. I think all of those organizations need to be focused on engagement as it relates to the agreement. Obviously, they've got broader charters or broader objectives, but in the area of trade and investment, everybody's looking home now. And I think that's the lesson learned over the end of the Obama administration through the entirety of the Trump administration and into the early, first year of the Biden administration. It's all about, like we said, going back to this whole idea, it's all about localization. And I think that the more our business organizations and associations can do to help get the message out about why this agreement is so important. I mean, a lot of people were disappointed that we didn't end up getting into the TTP. If you look at the agreement that the USMCA that we have signed here, and Dan highlighted a lot of the important chapters and important provisions, we've got protections in the USMCA that are better than that agreement. And I know a lot of people were disappointed. Oh, well, no TTP. Well, you know what? You've got a much better agreement here with the USMCA that's focused regionally. So I think that's an important point that we need to look forward at as well.
That leads me to ask this question, and we only have a couple more minutes, so maybe just one or two of you can touch on this. Are there any misconceptions that need to be busted up? Patrick, you said something just now that made me think of that, about the USMCA. Like, is there anything out there that people just are not understanding and not embracing? What message would you have there?
Well, I'll certainly jump on. In defense of Mexico, it is not as dangerous as the persona puts forward. And people need to educate themselves on Mexico a whole lot more. And Canada is not as far away as people think it is, and it's not just snow and ice. And some of these things are pretty simple things, because when you're taking a 6-hour flight, 8-hour flight to Asia, and you're an hour away from Hermosillo, 2 hours away from Mexico City, a couple of hours away from Calgary, people need to rethink their geography and understand that these countries are much more in common. How about a French language and a Spanish language, both romantic languages, and here we sit in the middle? And I mean, there's so much more that we should be paying attention to. And it's always that old terrible thing that we do. We always look to the new thing on the other side of the fence and say, gee, it's shinier, it's cooler. I'm telling someone I'm flying to Dubai when, going somewhere like Toronto or Hermosillo is way more efficient, and you're going to actually probably get something done faster. So and culturally, the countries are closer aligned than people could possibly think.
Those are all good.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Any other thoughts around misconceptions, or does that cover it? We've covered.
It's a perfect landing point, but I'll just, Glenn's a professional diplomat. I'll say it less diplomatically. This is very hard for us as Americans to appreciate. There's no way we're going to win against the rest of the world without Canada and Mexico. It's just, the U.S. cannot do this alone. But the one way we can really get on top versus the rest of the world is working with Canada and Mexico. We have it all. We have everything we need in that region. And we need to stop always chasing that shiny ball because it's right here in our backyards. And if we do that, the future is limitless in terms of what the success that we can achieve.
By the way, Glenn is a diplomat figuratively and literally. He didn't mention this in his pedigree, but he is the honorary consul for Canada here in Arizona.
We do indeed have a distinguished panel. It has been a pleasure to learn and lean in and listen to everything that you're sharing today. It's certainly our listeners will appreciate your time as well. Stephen, I would love for you to just have some parting words for us before I kind of close out with some of our announcements.
Yeah, so I just want to reiterate what everyone has said. This relationship between the United States and Arizona specifically, and Canada and Mexico are the most important relationships that we have around the world. We need to continue to nurture them, continue to work together, continue to understand each other. And it's really one of those things where, it's win, 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 win. The more we collaborate, the more we partner, the more we work together, the more we understand each other, the more benefit it's going to bring to the citizens of the United States and to Arizona. So, and I'll just echo what several folks said, and that is we need all to do a better job of educating people on the opportunities that USMCA represents. And that was the purpose of today's program.
I believe that you all have accomplished that. Thank you again for being here with us. Do stay on after we go off air for just a couple of moments. You've been listening to AZ TechCast, brought to you by Phoenix Business Radio with Business RadioX. Today's AZ TechCast was brought to you by Arizona Commerce Authority, the state's leading economic development organization with a streamlined mission to grow and strengthen Arizona's economy. Thank you again, Arizona Commerce Authority. And many thanks also to JDH Insights, the 2021 Tech Advocate sponsor. Visit jdhinsights.com to enhance leadership and improve team dynamics to take your business to the next level. If you're interested in being a podcast participant or a sponsor for the Council's AZ TechCast, please contact marketing@aztechcouncil.org to lock in your opportunity to further position you as a tech expert, influencer, and innovator. Some media leans left, some lean right, and we lean business. Until next time, I'm Karen Nowicki. Thank you again so much for being here with us. Have a great rest of your day.